I've always believed that true character reveals itself in how people treat those they think can't benefit them. My name is Emma Miller, and this is how I learned just how right that belief was. Growing up, my parents taught me the value of hard work and humility. My father was a janitor at a prestigious tech company, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They worked themselves to the bone to give me an education, often going without so I could have what I needed. "Emma, sweetheart," my mother would say, her hands rough from years of scrubbing, "knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you." Those words echoed in my mind as I worked my way through college, studying finance and computer science. By day, I attended classes. By night, I cleaned offices just like my father. But I had a secret that kept me going. I was developing a revolutionary financial algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. During my final year, while most students were partying, I was perfecting my program. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. My algorithm caught the attention of a major investment firm. They offered me $75 million for it, plus a position on their board. I accepted the deal but kept my wealth hidden. I continued living modestly, investing wisely, and growing my fortune quietly. That's when I met James. He literally ran into me at a small cafe where I was working on my laptop. Hot coffee splashed across the table, barely missing my computer. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, frantically grabbing napkins. His genuine distress made me laugh. "It's okay," I assured him, helping to clean up. "I'm Emma." "James, please let me buy you another coffee. It's the least I can do." One coffee led to dinner, and dinner led to more. James was kind, funny, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a high school teacher, passionate about making a difference in his students' lives. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Then I met his family. Patricia, my mother-in-law, lived in a sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood. Her husband, Robert, had passed away years ago, leaving her a comfortable inheritance. From our first meeting, she made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her son. "A cleaner's daughter," she said, eyeing me over her wine glass. "How quaint. James, darling, I thought you were dating that lovely doctor's daughter, Caroline." "Mom," James warned, but the tone was set. At every family gathering, Patricia found ways to remind me of my place. She'd ask me to help the catering staff, claiming I feel more comfortable in the kitchen. When James defended me, she'd laugh it off as just trying to make Emma feel at home. Her daughter, my sister-in-law Amanda, was cut from the same cloth. A successful real estate agent, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her success or remind me of my humble beginnings. "Emma, dear," she'd say with false sweetness, "I have some clients looking for a cleaning service. Should I give them your mother's number?" I took it all in stride, partly because I knew the truth about my wealth, but mostly because I wanted to see people's true colors. James would squeeze my hand under the table, whispering apologies for his family's behavior, but never truly standing up to them. What they didn't know was that I had plans of my own. I'd been quietly buying properties throughout the city, including several in Patricia's prestigious neighborhood. The mansion next door to hers had been on the market for months, and through a series of shell companies, I acquired it for $12 million. The annual family reunion was approaching, a 3-day affair where relatives from across the country gathered at Patricia's house. This year, however, would be different. "James, honey," Patricia announced at dinner a week before the reunion, "I've arranged the guest rooms. You'll stay in your old room, of course. Emma can use the basement. We need the good rooms for family who actually contribute to our gatherings." James shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, Emma's my wife. And as my daughter-in-law, she should be grateful for whatever accommodation she receives." Patricia cut in smoothly. "Besides, with her background, she's probably used to much worse." I simply smiled and said, "The basement will be fine, Patricia." If only she knew what was coming. The reunion began on a Friday. Cars filled Patricia's circular driveway as family members arrived. I helped carry luggage, serve drinks, and endure the usual snide comments about my background. That evening, as everyone settled into their luxurious guest rooms, I made my way to the basement with my small suitcase. The basement was cold and musty, with a narrow cot set up in the corner. As I sat on the creaking bed, I heard laughter floating down from above. Patricia's voice carried clearly through the vents. "Can you believe she actually took the basement without complaint? I told James he should have married Caroline. At least she knows how to carry herself in proper society. More laughter followed. I checked my phone. One new message from my property manager. Everything is ready for tomorrow's inspection, Mrs. Miller. The mansion next door has been fully furnished according to your specifications. I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my back aching from the basement cot, and made my way upstairs. The kitchen was already bustling with activity as Patricia directed the catering staff for the day's brunch. "Oh, Emma. Good. Since you're up, make yourself useful and help Maria with the dishes," Patricia commanded, not even looking in my direction. "And do try to stay out of sight when the guests arrive. We have some very important people coming today." I caught James' eye as he entered the kitchen. He looked pained but remained silent, reaching for his coffee. The familiar sting of his passive acceptance made me straighten my shoulders. Just a few more hours. "Actually," I said calmly, checking my watch, "I have an appointment this morning." Patricia's head snapped up. "An appointment? During our family reunion? How incredibly rude." "Now, Mom," James began weakly, but Amanda cut him off as she swept into the kitchen. "Mother, the Hendersons just pulled up. You know, the ones who bought that gorgeous mansion next door." She smirked at me. "They're my biggest clients this year. The sale was worth millions in commission." Patricia preened. "Wonderful. Emma, before you leave for whatever menial task you have planned, at least make yourself useful and help serve the Moses." I smiled. "I really must go. My real estate agent is waiting." "Real estate agent?" Amanda scoffed. "What, are you looking at studio apartments in the bad part of town?" The doorbell rang, and Patricia hurried to answer it, shooting me a warning look. I followed the group into the grand foyer, where a sophisticated woman in a sharp suit waited. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," she said, smiling directly at me. "The mansion is ready for your final inspection." The room fell silent. Patricia's carefully crafted smile froze on her face. "There must be some mistake," she said with a forced laugh. "Emma isn't." "Emma Miller," I confirmed, stepping forward. "Owner of the mansion next door." Amanda's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "That's impossible. I handled that sale." "Through my shell corporation, yes," I said pleasantly. "I believe your commission check was quite substantial." James stared at me, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. "Emma, what's going on?" "Perhaps we should all sit down," I suggested, gesturing to the living room. "I have quite a story to tell." Once everyone was seated, Patricia and Amanda perched on the edge of their seats like birds ready to take flight. I began. 7 years ago, I developed a financial algorithm that sold for $75 million, I said calmly. Since then, my investments have multiplied that many times over. The mansion next door is just one of many properties I own. "But you let us think," Patricia sputtered, "that I was a cleaning lady's daughter who married above her station." I finished. "Yes, I did. And you all showed me exactly who you are through how you treated someone you thought was beneath you." "This is absurd." Amanda stood up, her face flushed. "Mother, she's clearly lying." My real estate agent cleared her throat. "I can assure you, Mrs. Henderson, that Mrs. Miller's credentials are impeccable. In fact, she owns controlling interest in the development company that built this entire neighborhood." Patricia's face had gone from red to white. "The entire neighborhood?" "Including this house," I confirmed quietly. "I bought it last month when it was technically still under your late husband's estate. The paperwork was finalized yesterday." The silence that followed was deafening. James had sunk into his chair, his face a mask of shock and dawning realization. "You mean?" Patricia's voice trembled. "This isn't my house anymore." "It's mine," I said simply. "Just like the basement where you made me sleep last night." Amanda jumped up. "Mother, she can't do this. We'll fight it in court." "You're welcome to try," I replied. "My lawyers have ensured everything is perfectly legal. But right now, I'd like you both to leave my house." "Leave?" Patricia gasped. "But where will I go? This is my home." "Was your home," I corrected. "Don't worry, I've arranged for temporary accommodations for you. There's a modest apartment available in the building where my parents used to work as janitors. I hear the basement unit is particularly cozy." The family gathering had devolved into chaos. Relatives whispered among themselves, some looking shocked, others secretly pleased to see Patricia's pride take such a fall. James finally found his voice. "Emma, why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. I turned to face my husband. "Would it have made a difference? Would you have stood up to your mother's treatment of me if you'd known I was wealthy? Because if money is what it takes to earn basic respect in this family, then we have bigger problems than where I sleep." The real estate agent cleared her throat. "Mrs. Miller, shall we proceed with the inspection of your new property?" "Yes," I said, standing. "Patricia, I'll have my staff help you pack. You have until tomorrow evening to vacate the premises." As I walked toward the door, Patricia's voice rang out, suddenly honeyed and pleading. "Emma, dear, surely we can discuss this. We're family after all." I paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. "Family? Let's talk about family, Patricia. Last Christmas, you seated me at the children's table and told everyone it was because I wouldn't know how to behave at the adults' dinner. Last month, you accidentally excluded me from James' birthday celebration. And just yesterday, you made me sleep in a basement because you said I wasn't good enough for a real room." I didn't mean," she stammered. "Yes, you did," I said firmly. "You meant every slight, every insult, every attempt to humiliate me. You showed me exactly who you are, Patricia. Now I'm showing you exactly who I am." The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the silent house as I walked out, head held high. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's sobs and Amanda's angry protests, but I didn't look back. The following weeks were a storm of activity and emotions. Patricia and Amanda moved out as required, though not without drama. They hired lawyers, of course, but as my legal team had predicted, every transaction was ironclad. I moved into the mansion next door, leaving James to decide his own path. The distance gave me time to think about our marriage and what it meant to build a life with someone who couldn't stand up for you. One evening, about a month after the revelation, my security team alerted me to a visitor. James stood at my front door, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I led him to my home office, a warm room filled with family photos, including one of my parents on their 30th anniversary. James' eyes fixed on it as he sat down. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "About everything. About us. I've also been seeing a therapist." I waited, letting him find his words. "I failed you, Emma, not just at the reunion, but every time I let my mother treat you like you were beneath us. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just being a coward." "Yes, you were," I agreed softly. He winced but continued. "The thing is, I kept wondering why you didn't tell me about your success. Then I remembered last Thanksgiving when Mom made that comment about your father being just a janitor, and I laughed. I actually laughed." Tears formed in his eyes. "That's when you were going to tell me, wasn't it?" I nodded. "I had the papers in my bag. But watching you laugh at your own father-in-law, I realized that you were just like them." "I was," he admitted, "and that shame is mine to carry. But Emma, I want you to know what's happened since you left." He straightened in his chair. "I resigned from my teaching position at Brighton Prep." This surprised me. James had taught at the prestigious private school for years. "I took a job at Riverside High School instead," he continued. "It's in the neighborhood where you grew up. The kids there, they remind me of you. Brilliant, determined, just needing someone to believe in them. And your mother? I haven't spoken to her since she moved out. She and Amanda have been trying to rally the family against you, but it backfired." Cousin Sarah came forward about how Mom had treated her when she married beneath her station. Then Uncle Robert shared stories about her behavior toward his second wife. "It's like your courage in standing up to her gave others permission to speak their truth." I absorbed this information, noting the changes in James. He seemed more grounded, more present. "There's more," he said. "I've been volunteering at the community center where your mom used to work. Did you know they have a program teaching financial literacy to cleaning staff and janitors? I'm helping them expand it." "Why are you telling me all this, James?" "Because I want to earn back your respect," he said simply. "Not because you're wealthy, but because you're the same amazing woman who helped me grade papers until midnight and made soup when I was sick. I was too weak to deserve you before. I want to become someone who does." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Patricia. "Your mother's at the apartment building," I told James. "She's demanding to speak with me." You don't have to go, he said quickly. Actually, I think I do. I found Patricia in the basement apartment where she now lived. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Her designer clothes looked out of place against the concrete walls. Hello, Patricia. She turned, and I was struck by how different she looked. The carefully maintained facade had cracked, showing the insecure woman beneath. Emma, she said, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Finally, she whispered, I understand now. Understand what? What it feels like, to be judged by where you live. To have people look down on you. Her hands trembled. Yesterday, I couldn't get a restaurant reservation because of my new address. Me, I've been going there for 20 years. Feels awful, doesn't it? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've been horrible. Not just to you, but to so many people. Living here, being treated the way I treated others, it's opened my eyes. That was the point, I said quietly. She looked up sharply. You mean, this wasn't just revenge? Revenge would have been making you homeless. This was about education. Patricia sank onto the small sofa. I've lost everything. My home, my social standing, my son. You haven't lost James, I corrected. He's choosing to be his own man for the first time. Whether you lose him permanently depends on whether you can accept that change. And you? She asked hesitantly. Have I lost you as a daughter-in-law? I studied her carefully. That depends on you too, Patricia. Real change takes more than a few weeks of humility. Will you help me? She asked softly. I don't mean financially. I mean help me learn to be better. It was the first time I'd ever heard genuine vulnerability in her voice. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party. Patricia was there, wearing a simple dress rather than her usual designer labels. She helped in the kitchen not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. Amanda came too, having recently started volunteering at a women's shelter, a requirement I'd added to her lease when she asked to rent one of my properties. James and I were still working on our marriage, taking things day by day. He'd proven his commitment to change, not through grand gestures, but through consistent actions and unwavering support. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around the table. My parents were there, my father deep in conversation with James about the financial literacy program, which had expanded to 3 more community centers. My mother and Patricia were exchanging recipes, their previous class barriers dissolved. Emma, Patricia said during dessert, I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching me that true worth isn't about where you live or what you own. It's about how you treat people. She smiled sadly. I just wish I'd learned that lesson sooner. Later that night, as James and I stood on our balcony overlooking the neighborhood, he asked, Do you regret any of it? I thought about the past year, the pain, the growth, the transformations. No, I said finally. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. He took my hand, and we stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The basement apartment where Patricia lived was visible from our vantage point, its lights glowing warmly in the darkness. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to become better than they were. My phone buzzed. A message from my investment team about another successful algorithm deployment. But for once, I didn't check it immediately. Some things were more valuable than money. And I was finally surrounded by people who understood that truth.
My name is Emma Sullivan, and I never thought I'd own my father's mortgage. But life has a way of serving justice when you least expect it, especially during Christmas. I still remember that evening clearly, the massive Christmas tree in our family home's living room, decorated with ornaments that cost more than most people's monthly salary, the scent of expensive catering wafting through the air, and the sound of crystal glasses clinking as my stepmother, Diana, entertained her high society friends. The Sullivan family Christmas party was always an extravagant affair, designed to show off our family's supposed wealth and status. But this year was different. This year I had finally made something of myself, though nobody in that house knew it yet. Emma, darling, Diana's voice cut through the party chatter, dripping with false sweetness. The kitchen staff needs help with the dishes. Why don't you make yourself useful? I stood there in my carefully chosen black dress, not designer like hers, but elegant nonetheless, and watched as my father averted his eyes, pretending to be deeply interested in his wine glass. He hadn't defended me in the 15 years since he married Diana. Why start now? I'm a guest, Diana, I said quietly but firmly. Just like everyone else. She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Oh sweetie, you're not like everyone else here. These are successful people, executives, entrepreneurs, people who matter. She gestured to the room full of her country club friends. You work in what again? Finance. At some small firm nobody's heard of. If she only knew that small firm was Phoenix Capital, one of the largest private equity firms in the country. If she only knew I wasn't just working there, I owned it. The kitchen, she repeated, her smile never reaching her eyes. That's where you belong. We wouldn't want to embarrass the family, would we? My half-sister Victoria snickered from her place on the expensive leather couch. Mom's right, Emma. Know your place. I looked around the room at my father's silence, at Diana's smug smile, at Victoria's contempt. These people had spent years making me feel small, less than unworthy. They had no idea that while they were busy flaunting their wealth at country clubs, I was building an empire. Diana had started dating my father when I was 12, right after my mother passed away. She swept in with her designer clothes and society connections, promising him a better life. What she really wanted was his money and status. Back then, the Sullivans were one of the most respected families in Boston. But Diana's expensive tastes and bad investments had slowly drained my father's resources. The mortgage on this house, this shrine to their pretentious lifestyle, had been refinanced 3 times. Their perfect facade was cracking, but their pride wouldn't let them admit it. I had watched for years as Diana systematically pushed me aside. When I got accepted to Harvard Business School, she convinced my father it would be a waste of money to help with tuition. She'll probably drop out anyway, she had said. So I worked my way through school, took out loans, survived on ramen noodles while Victoria got a brand new car for her sweet 16. Now standing in that living room full of fake laughs and real cruelty, something inside me snapped. You're right, Diana, I said, my voice steady. I do belong in the kitchen. At least there I'll be among honest people. I walked away from their superior smirks, my heels clicking on the marble floor. In the kitchen, the actual catering staff greeted me warmly. They had seen how Diana treated me, and unlike her friends in the living room, they had genuine kindness in their eyes. What Diana didn't know was that I had received an interesting call from her bank that morning. The Sullivan family mortgage was in trouble. 3 missed payments, multiple late fees, and a foreclosure notice was just around the corner. Their perfect Christmas might be their last one in this house. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, my CFO. Are the papers ready? I asked quietly. Yes, boss. The bank is ready to sell the mortgage. They know the Sullivans are a liability now. Should I proceed? I looked through the kitchen door at my family in the living room, all playing their parts in this charade of success while their financial house of cards was collapsing. Do it, I said. Buy it all. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just needs to be poetic. Little did they know their perfect Christmas party was about to become the beginning of their biggest nightmare. And I, the girl they banished to the kitchen, was about to become their worst fear, their landlord. 2 weeks passed since that Christmas party. I hadn't heard from my family, which wasn't unusual. They only contacted me when they needed something or wanted to remind me of my supposed failures. But this silence was about to be shattered. I sat in my corner office on the 47th floor of the Phoenix Capitol building, reviewing acquisition reports when my assistant buzzed in. Miss Sullivan, your father and stepmother are here. They don't have an appointment, but they're quite insistent. I smiled, knowing exactly why they had come. The bank's call must have finally reached them. Send them in, Grace. Diana burst through the door first, her designer heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. My father followed, his face ashen. They stopped short when they saw me, taking in the massive office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Boston. Emma. Diana's voice cracked with disbelief. What is this? We were told to meet with the CEO of Phoenix Capital. You are, I replied calmly, standing up from behind my desk. Welcome to my office. The color drained from Diana's face. My father gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles turning white. This is impossible, he stammered. Why? I asked, my voice level. Because I'm just the help? Only good enough to serve drinks at your Christmas party? Diana's shock quickly morphed into anger. We're not here to discuss your little office job. The bank called about our mortgage. They said it's been sold to Phoenix Capital. That's correct. I picked up a folder from my desk and opened it. 3 missed payments in the last 6 months. multiple late fees. Credit cards maxed out to pay for Victoria's engagement party last month. You're in quite a financial mess, aren't you? My father finally found his voice. How do you know all this? Because I bought your mortgage, I said simply. Every cent of it. Phoenix Capital now owns the deed to your house. Diana laughed, but there was hysteria edging into her voice. This is ridiculous. You couldn't possibly. I pressed a button on my desk phone. Grace, please bring in the portfolio reports for the Sullivan acquisition. While we waited, I walked to my office window looking out at the city below. You know, Diana, while you were busy making me feel worthless, I was building something. Every time you pushed me aside, excluded me, treated me like a servant, I worked harder. When you convinced Dad not to help with my Harvard tuition, I didn't give up. I graduated top of my class while working 3 jobs. Grace entered with the reports, placing them on my desk before quietly leaving. I continued. I started Phoenix Capital 8 years ago. We now manage over $12 billion in assets. That small firm nobody's heard of just acquired its 15th company last month. I turned back to face them. Diana had sunk into a chair, her perfectly maintained facade crumbling. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. So here's what's going to happen, I said, sitting back down at my desk. You have 2 options. Option 1. You start making your payments on time, every month, to me. No more refinancing, no more extensions. 1 late payment and I begin foreclosure proceedings. And option 2? My father asked quietly. You move out. I hear there are some lovely apartments for rent across town. Much more suited to your actual budget than that mansion you can't afford. Diana stood up suddenly, her eyes blazing. You can't do this to us. We're family. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Was I family when you forced me to eat in the kitchen at Christmas? Was I family when you told everyone I was a failure? When you mocked my career, my choices, my life? I pulled out the Christmas party invitation from my desk drawer, the one that had arrived with a handwritten note from Diana suggesting I help the catering staff, instead of attending as a guest. You made your choice about family long ago, I said. I'm just the landlord now. Diana turned to my father, her voice shrill. Richard, do something. But my father just stood there, finally seeing me clearly for the first time in 15 years. Emma, I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected him. It was easier to look away. Well, you can't look away anymore. I pressed another button on my phone. Grace, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan out. And send them the updated mortgage terms. As they were led out of my office, Diana turned back, her face contorted with rage. You'll regret this. Victoria will never forgive you. I smiled calmly. Oh, about Victoria. Phoenix Capital just bought a controlling interest in her fiancé's company. Board meetings tomorrow. I don't think her engagement will survive the restructuring I have planned. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone in my office. I turned back to the window, watching as they emerged from the building below, looking small from this height. Diana was gesturing wildly, probably already spinning this story for her country club friends. That evening, I drove past the family house, my house now technically. The Christmas lights were still up, twinkling mockingly in the winter darkness. My phone buzzed with texts from Victoria, all caps and exclamation points, threatening and begging in equal measure. I ignored them all and drove to the small cemetery across town. My mother's grave was dusted with fresh snow, the simple headstone a stark contrast to the elaborate Sullivan family monuments. I did it, Mom, I whispered, placing a single rose on her grave. I built something of my own. Over the next few months, I watched as the family's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Diana's friends slowly disappeared as the truth about their financial situation spread. Victoria's fiancé broke off their engagement after his company's restructuring left him with a much smaller trust fund. The country club membership was quietly cancelled. They kept the house barely. Every month, the mortgage payment arrived on time, usually accompanied by a bitter note from Diana. My father tried to reach out a few times, claiming he wanted to make amends, but I wasn't interested in his too late attempts at fatherhood. The next Christmas, I didn't receive an invitation to the family party. Instead, I hosted my own celebration, in my penthouse apartment, surrounded by the people who had actually been there for me over the years. My Harvard roommate who'd helped me study while I worked night shifts. My first employee at Phoenix Capital who had believed in my vision. The catering staff from last year's party, who now worked exclusively for my company's events. As we raised our glasses for a toast, my phone buzzed with an alert. Diana had made the mortgage payment, 3 days early this time. I smiled and turned back to my real family. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's life. Sometimes it's about building your own, so beautiful and successful that they have to watch from the kitchen window looking in. I smiled and turned back to my real family. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's life. Sometimes it's about building your own, so beautiful and successful that they have to watch from the kitchen window looking in. 6 months after that Christmas, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Victoria stood in my doorway, looking considerably less polished than usual. Her designer clothes were from last season, her handbag a convincing knockoff rather than the real thing. "Can we talk?" she asked, her usual arrogance absent from her voice. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down, fidgeting with her purse strap. "Mom and Dad are getting divorced," she blurted out. "Dad finally had enough of her spending. He's moving out next month." I kept my face neutral. "I'm aware. The mortgage payment notifications will be adjusted accordingly." Victoria leaned forward. "That's actually why I'm here. I need a job. Nobody will hire me since the scandal with James's company, and Mom can't support me anymore." I studied my half-sister carefully. The girl who had tormented me through our teenage years, who had delighted in every small humiliation Diana inflicted on me, was now asking for my help. "Why should I?" I asked simply. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Because you're better than us. Better than what we did to you. I see that now." I thought about it for a long moment. "There's an entry-level position in our accounting department. You'll start at the bottom just like I did. No special treatment, no shortcuts. If you want to succeed here, you'll earn it." Victoria's eyes widened. "Really? You'd give me a chance?" "Everyone deserves one chance to change," I said. "What you do with it is up to you." A year later, I stood in my office watching the Christmas snow fall over Boston. Victoria had surprised everyone by proving to be a dedicated worker. She had moved into a modest apartment, started therapy, and was slowly building a life independent of Diana's influence. My father had relocated to a small condo across town. He sent me a letter every month, not asking for forgiveness but sharing stories about my mother that he'd never told before. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I was learning to understand him. Diana still lived in the house, rattling around those empty rooms alone. She had been forced to let most of the staff go, and rumor had it she now did her own dishes. Sometimes life's lessons come from the very things we look down upon. As for me, Phoenix Capital had expanded to 3 more cities. The small firm nobody had heard of was now featured in Forbes. My story of success despite family opposition had become an inspiration to others, proving that sometimes the people who push you down end up becoming the foundation you build your success upon. That Christmas, I received an invitation to the country club's annual gala, not as a guest but as the keynote speaker. I thought about Diana, who would be watching from a table in the back, no longer the queen of her social circle. I thought about my father trying to rebuild his life with a new understanding of what truly matters. I thought about Victoria, who would be attending as my employee rather than a privileged heiress. I opened my desk drawer and looked at the old photo I kept there, me at 12, standing with my mother in front of our modest old house, both of us smiling without pretense or pride. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. "We showed them all." My assistant buzzed in. "Miss Sullivan? The board members are ready for the year-end meeting." I stood up, straightening my suit. The meeting room would be full of people who had earned their place through merit, not marriage or manipulation. This was my world now, one built on real success, true relationships, and the quiet satisfaction of proving that the girl they sent to the kitchen was worthy of so much more. Sometimes revenge is not about the moment of triumph, but about the life you build afterward. Sometimes the best response to cruelty is not more cruelty, but becoming so successful that their attempts to diminish you become laughable. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who tried to break you end up having to watch as you surpass every limitation they tried to place upon you. As I walked into the boardroom, head held high, I couldn't help but smile. The mortgage payment from the Sullivan house had arrived that morning, on time as always. Some lessons, it seems, stick better when they're paid for in monthly installments. I stood in front of my easel, brush poised over canvas, when my mother's text arrived. Thanksgiving dinner. 6 p.m. sharp. Your brother has big news about Sterling Industries. My hand trembled slightly, sending a drop of crimson paint splattering across the pristine white canvas. Of course Michael had news. Michael always had news, each announcement more self-congratulatory than the last. I hadn't planned on attending another family dinner. The last 3 had been exercises in humiliation, with my parents and brother taking turns reminding me what a disappointment I'd become. But something told me I needed to be there tonight. After all, tomorrow would change everything. The Victorian mansion my parents called home loomed before me as I pulled into the circular driveway. My modest Audi looked out of place among the luxury vehicles. Michael's new Porsche, Mom's Range Rover, Dad's Mercedes. But appearances, as I'd learned, could be deceiving. Madison. My mother's greeting was cool as she opened the door, her eyes scanning my outfit with barely concealed disapproval. You couldn't dress up a bit? This is a special occasion. I glanced down at my black silk dress. Simple but elegant. I came straight from the studio. She sighed. Still playing with your little paintings? I thought you'd have grown out of that phase by now. The phase she referred to was my successful career as an artist and gallery owner. Not that they'd ever bothered to visit my gallery or attend any of my shows. Art wasn't a real career in the Sterling family. Michael's voice boomed from the dining room. Is that Maddie? Come in here, sis. Wait until you hear the news. The dining room was a shrine to old money, with its crystal chandelier and antique mahogany table. My brother sat at our father's right hand, practically vibrating with self-importance in his designer suit. His wife Catherine perched beside him, elegant and cold as an ice sculpture. Madison, my father nodded curtly. Sit down, we're about to serve. I took my usual place at the far end of the table, as far from the center of power as possible. The housekeeper began serving the first course. Some kind of fancy soup I didn't bother to taste. So, Michael couldn't contain himself any longer. I suppose you're all wondering about my big announcement. Our mother leaned forward eagerly. Tell us, darling. Though I suspect it has something to do with tomorrow's merger meeting. Michael's grin widened. Sterling Industries is about to become the largest manufacturing conglomerate in the Northeast. We're acquiring our biggest competitor, Blake Manufacturing, and their entire subsidiary network. Magnificent. Our father beamed. I always knew you'd take the company to new heights after I stepped down as CEO. I stirred my soup quietly, watching the drama unfold. They had no idea what was really happening behind the scenes of their precious merger. The best part, Michael continued, shooting me a smug look, is that we're finally moving into the luxury goods market. No more boring industrial manufacturing. We're talking high-end products, exclusive designs. He smirked. Real art, not the kind of amateur stuff Maddie wastes her time on. Catherine tittered politely while our mother nodded in approval. It's about time someone in this family understood the value of sophistication. Speaking of waste, my father turned his stern gaze to me. How is your little gallery doing? Still managing to pay the rent? Before I could answer, Michael cut in. Oh, come on, Dad. We all know she's probably burning through her trust fund. That's what happens when you choose finger painting over real business. Actually, I said quietly, the gallery's doing quite well. We just opened a new location downtown. Downtown? Catherine wrinkled her nose. In that awful arts district? How quaint. My mother sighed dramatically. Madison, dear, when are you going to get serious about your life? You're 32 years old. Michael was already running Sterling's European division at your age. And now, Michael raised his wine glass, I'm about to sign the biggest deal in Sterling's history. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp, we're acquiring Blake Manufacturing for a cool $400 million. I took a small sip of water, hiding my smile. That sounds like quite a deal. Have you met the owner of Blake Manufacturing? Michael waved his hand dismissively. Some reclusive artist type who inherited it from her father. She's selling through a proxy. Probably doesn't understand the first thing about business. But that works in our favor. An artist. Our mother's eyebrows shot up. How unfortunate. Though I suppose some people just aren't cut out for the corporate world. She gave me a pointed look. The important thing, my father interjected, is that Sterling Industries will finally have the market dominance it deserves. Michael has proven himself more than worthy of the Sterling legacy. Unlike some people, Catherine murmured, not quite under her breath. I set down my spoon, suddenly tired of the game. Tell me, Michael, have you reviewed the complete subsidiary structure of Blake Manufacturing? He frowned. Of course I have. What kind of question is that? And you're familiar with all their holdings? Their shell companies? Their art investment division? Michael's frown deepened. Art investment division? What are you talking about? Nothing, I smiled. Just thinking out loud. I'm sure tomorrow's meeting will be very enlightening. Listen, Michael's voice took on the condescending tone he'd perfected over the years. I know you think you understand business because you sell a few paintings to bored housewives, but this is the real deal. This merger will make Sterling Industries unstoppable. Our father raised his glass. To Michael Sterling, the future of our family legacy. Everyone clinked glasses except me. I was too busy thinking about the documents sitting in my briefcase, the ones that would be revealed at tomorrow's meeting. The ones that would show exactly who owned Blake Manufacturing, its subsidiaries, and its very profitable art investment division. Madison, my mother's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. At least try to be happy for your brother's success. God knows you've given us little enough to celebrate. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. You're right, Mother. Tomorrow will definitely be worth celebrating. I turned to Michael. Good luck with the merger. Running off to your little studio? Michael called after me. Don't worry, once the deal is done, I might commission a painting for my new office. Something suitable for a CEO. I paused at the door, thinking about the nameplate on my corner office at Blake Manufacturing's headquarters. The one that read, Madison Sterling, Chief Executive Officer. Thank you for dinner, I said softly. I'll see you all tomorrow at the merger signing. My mother frowned. Why would you be at the merger? Oh, I smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with messages from my executive team. Everything was in place for tomorrow's revelation. The Sterling family was about to learn that their artistic disappointment had built something far greater than they could imagine. And Michael's face when he realized who really owned Blake Manufacturing? That would be a masterpiece worth framing. The Sterling Industries boardroom buzzed with anticipation. I stood in the adjacent office, watching through one-way glass as my family settled into their seats of power. Michael at the head of the table, practically glowing with self-importance. Our father beside him, chest puffed with pride. Mother and Catherine perched nearby, gleaming with borrowed glory. Miss Sterling. My assistant Claire appeared at my elbow. Everything's ready. I nodded, adjusting my designer suit Valentino, not the Arts District boutique where my sister-in-law loved to mock. Have they reviewed the final documents? No, Claire smiled. As requested, the complete ownership structure of Blake Manufacturing was kept confidential until this morning. 10 years had led to this moment. While my family dismissed me as a failed artist, I'd been building an empire. It started with my father's throwaway comment at my first gallery opening. At least you can't destroy real business value with your paintings. That night, I'd looked at my trust fund, the one they thought I was burning through, and made my first investment. Art wasn't just about creation. It was about understanding value, seeing potential where others saw nothing. I began buying struggling companies through shell corporations, restructuring them and selling them for profit. Blake Manufacturing had been my masterpiece. I'd acquired it piece by piece, using holding companies and investment vehicles, keeping my name hidden behind layers of corporate structure. The art investment division alone was worth more than Sterling Industries' entire manufacturing operation. And now my brother was about to sign it all over to me. It's time, Claire announced. I took a deep breath and walked into the boardroom. The reaction was immediate. Madison. Michael's voice cracked with confusion. What are you doing here? Mother's face tightened. Darling, this is a private business meeting. Your brother is about to sign a very important deal. Oh, I know. I took my seat directly opposite Michael. That's why I'm here. Catherine's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. Security. She started to rise, but my father waved her down. Let her stay, he sighed. Maybe she'll learn something about real business. The doors opened again as my executive team filed in, all women, all dressed impeccably, all carrying thick folders of documents. Michael straightened his tie, clearly expecting to see Blake Manufacturing's representatives. "Where's the Blake team?" he demanded. "We're supposed to start signing in 5 minutes." I opened my folder slowly, savoring the moment. "You're looking at the Blake team." The silence was delicious. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Our father's face reddened dangerously. "What exactly are you trying to pull?" Catherine's voice had turned shrill. I nodded to Claire, who began distributing documents. "These are the complete ownership records for Blake Manufacturing, its subsidiaries and all associated holdings. You'll note that the controlling interest is held by Phoenix Art Investments, which in turn is owned by Sterling Creative Enterprises." I paused, letting the implications sink in. "Pie company." Michael snatched the papers, scanning them frantically. "This is impossible. Blake Manufacturing is owned by me," I finished quietly. "Every share, every subsidiary, every division, including the art investment branch that generated $89 million in profit last year, more than Sterling Industries' entire manufacturing operation." Our father's hands trembled as he flipped through the documents. "How? When did you?" 10 years ago, you told me I couldn't destroy real business value with my art." I met his eyes steadily. "So I decided to create it instead. While you were all laughing at my little gallery, I was building something bigger than Sterling Industries could ever imagine." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. We've spent months negotiating this deal." "No," I corrected him. "You spent months negotiating with my proxies, never bothering to look deeper into who really owned the company. You were so convinced an artist type couldn't understand business that you missed what was right in front of you." Mother found her voice at last. But the money? How could you possibly afford?" "My first gallery turned a profit in 6 months," I said calmly. "I reinvested everything, expanded into art consulting, then corporate acquisition. That arts district you sneered at? I own half the buildings there. That little studio, where I waste time painting? It's the headquarters of a $700 million corporate empire." Catherine's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. "So the merger won't be happening," I finished. "At least not the way you planned. My team has prepared a counteroffer." I slid new documents across the table. "Sterling Industries will be acquired by Blake Manufacturing. All operations will be restructured under our management." "You can't do this." Michael's voice rose to a shout. "Dad, tell her she can't do this." Our father was still staring at the ownership documents, his face ashen. "The numbers, these profit margins, how did we not see?" "Because you never bothered to look," I said quietly. "You were too busy dismissing me as a failure to notice what I was building." I stood up, smoothing my jacket. "You have 1 hour to review the terms. They're very generous. More than Blake Manufacturing is actually worth. Consider it a family discount." "And if we refuse?" Michael's voice shook with rage. "Then I'll take the company public. The IPO paperwork is already prepared. And once investors see our growth projections compared to Sterling's." I shrugged. "Well, let's just say the market isn't kind to overvalued manufacturing companies with outdated business models." Mother reached for me, her eyes pleading. "Madison, darling, surely we can discuss this as a family." "Family?" I laughed softly. "Last night you could barely stand to have me at your dinner table. Now you want to discuss business." "I always knew you had potential," my father tried, his voice wheedling. "All that tough love was just to motivate you. Save it." I nodded to my team, who began packing up their documents. 1 hour. Then I want your decision." As I turned to leave, Michael called out, "Why are you doing this?" "To humiliate us." I paused at the door. "No, Michael. I'm doing this because it's good business. After all, isn't that what you taught me? That nothing matters except the bottom line." I smiled. "Consider this your first lesson in modern corporate art." The next hour passed in a blur of legal discussions and number crunching. In the end, they signed. They had no choice. Blake Manufacturing's acquisition of Sterling Industries was a masterpiece of corporate strategy, as precisely crafted as any painting. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, formerly Michael's, looking at the latest profit reports. The merged company was thriving under new management. My brother had taken a consulting position at a friend's firm. Mother had stopped speaking to me entirely. Father sent occasional emails asking to discuss the future of our family legacy. I turned to the wall where I'd hung my latest painting, an abstract piece in shades of sterling silver and deep blue. Below it, the nameplate on my desk caught the afternoon light. Madison Sterling, Chief Executive Officer. Claire knocked softly before entering. Your sister-in-law is here. Says she wants to discuss a position in the company. I thought about Catherine's sneering comments about arts district boutiques and bored housewives. Tell her the only opening is in the mailroom, I said, turning back to my reports. After all, everyone has to start somewhere. Later that evening, as I worked on a new painting in my studio, I thought about success and how it's measured. My family had spent years defining it by their standards: boardrooms, balance sheets, and bottom lines. They never understood that art wasn't just about creating beauty. It was about seeing potential, understanding value, and having the vision to build something extraordinary. I'd done more than prove them wrong. I'd created my own masterpiece, one worth far more than they could ever imagine. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Can we talk? About the company? I set my brush down and typed a reply. Sorry, busy creating value. Try the arts district. I hear it's quite profitable these days. Then I turned back to my canvas. After all, I had two empires to run now. One built on paint, the other on paper. And both were worth every stroke. The bitter December wind whipped around me as I stood outside my childhood home, staring at the elegant colonial facade that held so many memories. I hadn't planned on coming back today, but my mother's urgent text message left me little choice. Family meeting. Non-negotiable. Be here at 6. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked in. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. My sister Emma sat perched on her favorite armchair, dressed impeccably in designer wear, while my parents stood near the fireplace, exchanging meaningful glances. Sarah, my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment she'd perfected over the years, finally decided to join us. I remained standing, my hands still on the doorknob. At 32, I'd learned to read the signs of an ambush. What's this about? My father cleared his throat, straightening his tie, a nervous habit he'd had since I could remember. We've made some decisions about the family business. Grandfather's company. My heart skipped a beat. Grandfather's medical technology company had been his pride and joy, built from nothing into a respected regional business. Before he passed away 3 years ago, he'd left the company to my parents with one condition. It would eventually be passed down to both his granddaughters equally. We sold it, my mother announced, her chin lifted defiantly. The paperwork was finalized this morning. The room spun slightly. You what? Emma needs capital for her startup. My father jumped in, gesturing toward my sister who sat there with a self-satisfied smile. Her business plan is brilliant. A luxury wellness app with integrated health tracking. The investors are practically fighting to get in. I struggled to find words. But grandfather wanted. Oh please, my mother cut in, rolling her eyes. Your grandfather didn't understand modern business. Emma has an MBA from Wharton. You. She paused, her lips curling slightly. You work as some kind of business consultant. You never had the vision or drive to run a real company. Emma stood up, smoothing her silk blouse. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. The company was struggling anyway. My startup is going to revolutionize the wellness industry. I already have meetings lined up with major investors. I felt my hands trembling and shoved them into my coat pockets. That company was my inheritance too. You had no right. We had every right, my father interrupted. The company was in our name. And let's be honest, Sarah, what would you have done with it? You've never shown any real business acumen. Remember that ridiculous proposal you made last year about expanding into rural markets? The memory stung. I'd spent months researching healthcare gaps in rural communities, developing a detailed expansion plan. They dismissed it without even reading it. The money from the sale is going to a better cause, my mother added. Emma's startup needs a proper launch. We're talking about a potential unicorn company here. Not some small-town medical supply business. I looked at Emma, who was now typing something on her phone, probably too important to be fully present for the destruction of my inheritance. And what about my share? Grandfather wanted it split equally. My mother's laugh was sharp. Oh honey, there is no your share. The sale barely covered what Emma needs for initial funding and marketing. But don't worry. Once the startup takes off, I'm sure Emma will remember her family. She patted my cheek condescendingly. Maybe she'll even give you a job. Emma glanced up from her phone. Speaking of which, we're having a launch party next week. Major investors, tech journalists, real movers and shakers. Try to dress appropriately if you come. No more of those boring pantsuits. I stood there letting their words wash over me. 10 years of being dismissed, underestimated, pushed aside in favor of Emma's brilliant ideas. 10 years of building something they knew nothing about. Well, I said quietly, I hope your startup succeeds, Emma. You've certainly paid enough for it. My mother frowned at my tone. Don't be bitter, Sarah. This is business. Something you never quite understood. If only they knew. If only they had any idea who they just invited to Emma's launch party. But they'd find out soon enough. You're right, Mom, I said, reaching for the door. It's just business. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from my assistant. Everything set for next week's meeting with Elite Wellness app. Documents ready for your review. I smiled, starting my engine. They thought they'd sold my inheritance to fund Emma's dreams. They had no idea they'd just handed it to the very person they'd been trying to impress for months. The mysterious CEO of Phoenix Ventures, one of the largest venture capital firms in the tech industry. Me. The launch party would certainly be interesting. Very interesting indeed. The week leading up to Emma's launch party passed in a blur of preparation. While my family was busy orchestrating their perfect event, I was finalizing the details of something much bigger. Something they never saw coming. Standing outside the gleaming high-rise where Emma had rented the penthouse venue, I adjusted my designer suit, Armani, not the boring pantsuits my sister despised. The security guard nodded respectfully as I approached. Good evening, Ms. Mitchell. He'd clearly been given the guest list. I almost laughed at the irony. The elevator ride to the penthouse gave me time to reflect. 10 years ago, when I left my junior position at a consulting firm to strike out on my own, my family had treated it as further proof of my inability to succeed in real business. What they didn't know was that I'd already secured 3 major clients and had a clear vision of what I wanted to build. While Emma bounced between trending business ideas, changing her mind with each new fad, I methodically built Phoenix Ventures into one of the most respected venture capital firms in the tech industry. I kept my identity as CEO private, operating through a network of shell companies and subsidiaries. In the press, I was simply known as SM, the reclusive founder who never appeared in public. The elevator doors opened to reveal a scene of calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and Silicon Valley's finest milling about in expensive evening wear. My mother spotted me first, her eyes widening slightly at my appearance. Sarah, you actually dressed appropriately for once. She gestured to my outfit with approval. Emma's in the main room with some potential investors. Try not to interrupt. These are very important people. I smiled. I'm sure they are. Emma stood in the center of a small crowd, gesturing animatedly as she described her app's features. It's going to revolutionize the wellness industry. We're talking AI-driven health insights, personalized coaching, premium content. Our father hovered nearby, beaming with pride. He'd always been easily dazzled by Emma's grand pronouncements and flashy presentations. I wondered how he'd react when he learned the truth. The bitter December wind whipped around me as I stood outside my childhood home, staring at the elegant colonial facade that held so many memories. I hadn't planned on coming back today, but my mother's urgent text message left me little choice. Family meeting. Non-negotiable. Be here at 6. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked in. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. My sister Emma sat perched on her favorite armchair, dressed impeccably in designer wear, while my parents stood near the fireplace, exchanging meaningful glances. Sarah, my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment she'd perfected over the years, finally decided to join us. I remained standing, my hand still on the doorknob. At 32, I'd learned to read the signs of an ambush. What's this about? My father cleared his throat, straightening his tie, a nervous habit he'd had since I could remember. We've made some decisions about the family business. Grandfather's company. My heart skipped a beat. Grandfather's medical technology company had been his pride and joy, built from nothing into a respected regional business. Before he passed away 3 years ago, he'd left the company to my parents with one condition. It would eventually be passed down to both his granddaughters equally. We sold it, my mother announced, her chin lifted defiantly. The paperwork was finalized this morning. The room spun slightly. You what? Emma needs capital for her startup. My father jumped in, gesturing toward my sister who sat there with a self-satisfied smile. Her business plan is brilliant. A luxury wellness app with integrated health tracking. The investors are practically fighting to get in. I struggled to find words. But grandfather wanted. Oh please, my mother cut in, rolling her eyes. Your grandfather didn't understand modern business. Emma has an MBA from Wharton. She paused, her lips curling slightly. You work as some kind of business consultant. You never had the vision or drive to run a real company. Emma stood up, smoothing her silk blouse. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. The company was struggling anyway. My startup is going to revolutionize the wellness industry. I already have meetings lined up with major investors. I felt my hands trembling and shoved them into my coat pockets. That company was my inheritance too. You had no right. We had every right, my father interrupted. The company was in our name. And let's be honest, Sarah, what would you have done with it? You've never shown any real business acumen. Remember that ridiculous proposal you made last year about expanding into rural markets? The memory stung. I'd spent months researching healthcare gaps in rural communities, developing a detailed expansion plan. They dismissed it without even reading it. The money from the sale is going to a better cause, my mother added. Emma's startup needs a proper launch. We're talking about a potential unicorn company here. Not some small-town medical supply business. I looked at Emma, who was now typing something on her phone, probably too important to be fully present for the destruction of my inheritance. And what about my share? Grandfather wanted it split equally. My mother's laugh was sharp. Oh honey, there is no your share. The sale barely covered what Emma needs for initial funding and marketing. But don't worry. Once the startup takes off, I'm sure Emma will remember her family. She patted my cheek condescendingly. Maybe she'll even give you a job. Emma glanced up from her phone. Speaking of which, we're having a launch party next week. Major investors, tech journalists, real movers and shakers. Try to dress appropriately if you come. No more of those boring pantsuits. I stood there, letting their words wash over me. 10 years of being dismissed, underestimated, pushed aside in favor of Emma's brilliant ideas. 10 years of building something they knew nothing about. Well, I said quietly, I hope your startup succeeds, Emma. You've certainly paid enough for it. My mother frowned at my tone. Don't be bitter, Sarah. This is business. Something you never quite understood. If only they knew. If only they had any idea who they'd just invited to Emma's launch party. But they'd find out soon enough. You're right, Mom, I said, reaching for the door. It's just business. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from my assistant. Everything set for next week's meeting with Elite Wellness app. Documents ready for your review. I smiled, starting my engine. They thought they'd sold my inheritance to fund Emma's dreams. They had no idea they'd just handed it to the very person they'd been trying to impress for months. The mysterious CEO of Phoenix Ventures, one of the largest venture capital firms in the tech industry. Me. The launch party would certainly be interesting. Very interesting indeed. The week leading up to Emma's launch party passed in a blur of preparation. While my family was busy orchestrating their perfect event, I was finalizing the details of something much bigger. Something they never saw coming. Standing outside the gleaming high-rise where Emma had rented the penthouse venue, I adjusted my designer's suit, Armani, not the boring pantsuits my sister despised. The security guard nodded respectfully as I approached. Good evening, Ms. Mitchell. He'd clearly been given the guest list. I almost laughed at the irony. The elevator ride to the penthouse gave me time to reflect. 10 years ago, when I left my junior position at a consulting firm to strike out on my own, my family had treated it as further proof of my inability to succeed in real business. What they didn't know was that I'd already secured 3 major clients and had a clear vision of what I wanted to build. While Emma bounced between trending business ideas, changing her mind with each new fad, I methodically built Phoenix Ventures into one of the most respected venture capital firms in the tech industry. I kept my identity as CEO private, operating through a network of shell companies and subsidiaries. In the press, I was simply known as SM, the reclusive founder who never appeared in public. The elevator doors opened to reveal a scene of calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and Silicon Valley's finest milling about in expensive evening wear. My mother spotted me first, her eyes widening slightly at my appearance. "Sarah, you actually dressed appropriately for once." She gestured to my outfit with approval. "Emma's in the main room with some potential investors. Try not to interrupt. These are very important people." I smiled. "I'm sure they are." Emma stood in the center of a small crowd, gesturing animatedly as she described her app's features. "It's going to revolutionize the wellness industry. We're talking AI-driven health insights, personalized coaching, premium content." Our father hovered nearby, beaming with pride. He'd always been easily dazzled by Emma's grand pronouncements and flashy presentations. I wondered how he'd react when he learned the truth. Last week, they tried one final approach, having our family lawyer reach out about potential claims to grandfather's company. My legal team shut that down within hours, providing documentation of Phoenix Ventures' legitimate purchase through proper channels. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd sold their claim to the company themselves, too busy chasing Emma's hollow dreams to realize what they were giving up. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Megan entered with a stack of reports. "The numbers from the rural expansion are in," she said, smiling. "We're already seeing a 40% increase in access to essential medical supplies in the target communities." I picked up my grandfather's photo, running my finger along the frame. "He would have loved this," I said quietly. "There's something else," Megan added, hesitating slightly. "Your mother's been in the lobby for the past hour. She's asking to see you." I thought about the years of dismissal, the casual cruelty, the way they'd sold my inheritance without a second thought. But I also thought about my grandfather and what he'd built this company for in the first place. "Send her up," I said finally. My mother looked smaller somehow, standing in the doorway of the office. Gone was the designer outfit and perfectly coiffed hair. She looked tired, worn down by the consequences of her own actions. "Sarah," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "This office. It looks just like when your grandfather was here." I gestured to a chair but remained standing. "What do you want, Mom?" She twisted her hands together. "I've been thinking about what your grandfather would say. About all of this. About how we treated you. I think he made his wishes pretty clear when he wanted the company split equally," I replied coolly. Tears welled in her eyes. "We were wrong. So terribly wrong. About you, about business, about everything. Emma's startup was all flash and no substance, but you built something real. Something meaningful. Just like your grandfather did." I looked at his photo again, remembering the summers I'd spent here as a child, learning everything I could about the business while Emma rolled her eyes and called it boring. "The rural healthcare program," my mother continued. "It's exactly what this company needed. What you tried to tell us years ago." She wiped her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know that I understand now. Why he was always so proud of you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I sat down at grandfather's desk, my desk now, and opened one of the reports Megan had brought in. "The clinics are looking for volunteers," I said, not looking up. "Community outreach, basic administration. Nothing glamorous. Nothing Emma would have considered real business." My mother's breath caught. "Are you offering me a job?" "No." I met her eyes steadily. "I'm offering you a chance to understand what this company really means. What grandfather built it for. You can start next week, minimum wage, entry level. If you want to be part of this company's future, you'll need to earn it. Just like I did." She stood up straighter, smoothing her wrinkled shirt. "I'll be here Monday morning." As she turned to leave, I called after her, "Mom? Emma's not invited. Some things can't be fixed with a second chance." Once she was gone, I walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd built my empire in secret. On my desk, my grandfather's photo seemed to smile knowingly. He'd always said business wasn't about making the most money or having the flashiest office. It was about building something that mattered. I'd done exactly that. And now everyone knew it. Sometimes success isn't about proving people wrong. Sometimes it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about knowing when to offer a second chance, and when to walk away. I picked up my phone and finally responded to Emma's latest message. I hope you learned something valuable from all this. Consider it the last lesson you'll ever get from your family's business. Then I turned back to my work. There were communities waiting for medical supplies, clinics to be built, and a legacy to be honored. After all, that's what real business is about.